The first thing I noticed wasn't the peeling paint on the old Preston house or the quiet thud of the duffel bag at my side. It was the air. It didn't welcome me. It tasted like wet pine needles and memories I'd locked away long ago. I hadn't been back to Maple Hollow in over 2 decades. 20 years of military service, gone in a blur of deployments, orders, and dust. When I left, I thought I was escaping. Coming back, I realized escape had never been an option. I stood at the edge of the gravel driveway, staring at the house I used to know. It looked smaller now, like someone had shrunk the past to make room for new sins. My boots crunched the gravel with the weight of everything I carried. Honor, discharge, papers, and silence. I didn't come back for closure. I came back because Mom's voice on the answering machine had cracked when she said, "Come home, if you still call this home." That was 3 months ago. She died before I made it. The funeral had come and gone. No one told me. I found the obituary in an archived local newspaper. No mention of me, not even a footnote. I pressed the doorbell. Nothing. I knocked. Harder. Then the door creaked open, and there he was. Caleb. My brother. My older brother, once my idol, now wearing my father's gold watch like it was his birthright. He didn't flinch when he saw me, just stared. "Didn't think you'd show," he muttered. "I wasn't invited," I said. He didn't move aside. "We already handled everything. You don't need to be here." "I'm not here for the will," I lied. "I just wanted to see the place." He gave a humorless smile. "The place? This isn't your place anymore." The words hit like a slap. Not because I didn't expect them, but because he said them so easily, with no regret, no hesitation. I stepped past him without permission. The hardwood floors still creaked in the same places. The kitchen still smelled like cinnamon, though maybe that was just memory. Then I saw the photo wall. Every picture was there. Family vacations, Caleb's graduation, Dad's fishing trip with Uncle Lenny. But I wasn't in any of them, not even the old ones. It was like I'd never existed. I turned around. "Where's my room?" He didn't answer, just pulled a document from the drawer and slapped it on the counter. A new deed. His name. No mention of me. "You sold it?" I asked, throat tightening. "Dad transferred it before he passed," he said. "It's legal." I stared at the signature. It looked like Dad's handwriting, but something felt wrong. "Where's the original will?" "Lost in a flood," he said quickly. "Convenient." He leaned closer. "Look, Emma, you were gone. You missed everything. You don't just get to show up now and act like this matters to you." I didn't argue. I left. I slept in my truck that night, 2 blocks away, beneath a flickering street lamp. I didn't cry, not when the sky opened and poured rain into the cab. Not when I replayed our childhood in my head and realized every moment was now a lie. But I did whisper one thing before sleep finally came. "You stole it all, Caleb, and I'm going to take it back." I remember the day I lost everything like it's carved into the backs of my eyelids. It wasn't a single moment, not a crash or a scream or the drop of a gavel. It was slow, surgical, a betrayal that unfolded in silence. I had just returned from my final deployment. Nerves frayed, body aching from the weight of years spent in desert heat and fluorescent-lit bunkers. The Army called it a compassionate discharge. I called it a breakdown. Nobody said it, but I knew what they thought. Emma Preston had cracked. I called home. No answer. I left messages. Nothing. 3 weeks later, I received a package. No return address. Inside were a pair of our mother's earrings, the ones she always said she'd pass down to me, and a note on plain, white paper. "Thought you'd want these. The rest is taken care of." The rest. I didn't know what the rest meant until I found out Mom was gone. She'd died in her sleep, 2 states away, under the care of a hospice I didn't even know she'd entered. Caleb had signed the paperwork. planned the cremation, held the memorial, without me. The anger didn't come right away. At first it was confusion, then grief, then something darker. I called every number I had for him. He didn't answer. I emailed. The responses were short, cold, legalistic. Your presence is not required. Assets have been assigned per current legal arrangements. Please refrain from further contact. So I came back. I went to the cemetery first. No headstone, just a brass plaque embedded in the grass, with her name misspelled. Martha Preston. It was like a placeholder, like no one had bothered to fix it. I stood there for hours, just watching the wind move through the trees, remembering how Mom used to braid my hair on the porch swing, how she sang off-key and danced while cooking pancakes, how she'd write my name on every birthday card, even when I was overseas. She deserved more than this, so I drove to the house. Caleb wasn't there, but his wife, Monica, answered. She looked surprised and nervous. "Emma," she started, eyes darting behind her. "This isn't a good time." I pushed past her before she could stop me. The house looked different, modernized, sleek furniture, all the charm gutted and replaced with magazine gloss. I walked upstairs like I still belonged there, and that's when I saw it. The family vault, Dad's old safe, was in Caleb's office now. The same one I remember watching Dad open when we were kids. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was rage. I tried the old code. Mom's birthday. Click. The door creaked open. Inside were documents, birth certificates, deeds, a copy of our grandfather's will, the original one. I scanned the page. There it was, in black and white. The Preston family estate, including the property at 118 Clover Hill Lane, shall pass in equal share to both Emma Louise Preston and Caleb James Preston. Equal. I heard footsteps behind me, but I didn't turn. My hands trembled as I snapped a photo of the page with my phone. Then I reached for the folder beneath it. That's when he spoke. "You shouldn't be here," Caleb said. I turned slowly. His eyes weren't furious. They were blank. Cold. "Where's the rest of it?" I asked. "Burned," he said flatly. "Accident, basement flooded last winter. Everything else was damaged." "You forged it," I said. "You changed the deed. You left me out." He didn't deny it, just stood there arms crossed like he was waiting for me to scream. "Why?" I whispered. He tilted his head. "Because you left. Because you were always going to leave again. You had no right." "I had every right," he snapped. "I was here. I watched her die. I cleaned her room. I signed the papers." "You sent postcards." I stepped forward. "She was my mother, too." He sneered. "She stopped calling you that after you missed her 70th? That hit harder than I expected. "Get out," he said. "Before I call the cops." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream, but I saw Monica behind him, her face pale, her mouth pressed into a tight line. She wasn't surprised. She knew. I walked out. That night I booked a room at a roadside motel with a stained carpet and a broken heater. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone. My photo of the will. That single page. The truth, still intact. But no one would believe it unless I made them, and I would. Because that was the day I realized Caleb hadn't just stolen a house. He'd buried me alive. I used to believe that betrayal came from enemies. The battlefield had taught me that. You watch your six, you trust your unit, and the ones who aim at your back, you never see them coming until it's too late. But nothing prepared me for the kind of betrayal that smiles at you across a Thanksgiving table. The Preston family was the closest thing Maple Hollow had to royalty. My grandfather, Thomas Preston, founded the county's largest lumber mill back in the 60s, and by the time I was born, the Preston name was printed on plaques, benches, and bronze dedication plates all over town. When I left for the Army at 17, I carried that name like a badge of honor. But I learned quickly that honor doesn't travel, it only weighs you down. Still, I remembered our family the way it once was. Dad, with his stern wisdom, Mom humming in the kitchen, and Caleb, my protector. My big brother who once beat up a kid for pushing me off the swing, who read me stories when I had fevers, who hugged me the night before I left for boot camp and whispered, "Make us proud, Emmy." That's the Caleb I wanted to remember. But that Caleb died somewhere along the way, replaced by the man I confronted in that hallway. The one who locked away family legacies in fireproof vaults and rewrote the rules to make sure he always came out on top. And Monica, she was never the villain, but she was no innocent bystander either. She used to braid my hair in high school when Caleb brought her around. She called me M with a smile, but now she looked through me like I was made of smoke. She didn't stop him. Not once. I started digging. First came the property records. At the county clerk's office, I requested all title transfers for 118 Clover Hill Lane from the last 10 years. There it was, a transfer 3 months after my final deployment. The transferor, my father. The transferee, Caleb James Preston. Except Dad had been in hospice then, terminal, barely lucid. The signature on the document was shaky, but not in the way someone near death writes. It was deliberately imperfect, as if someone forged it and tried to make it look authentic by being messy. I requested a certified copy and filed a quiet title complaint. It wouldn't undo anything yet, but it would place a legal flag on any future property changes. Next, I pulled my grandfather's original will from the state archive. There was a backup, thanks to the attorney who filed it years ago. Same language. Equal shares. Equal rights. So why had Caleb locked me out? The answer came from an unlikely source. My old guidance counselor, Miss Evelyn, now retired, but still sharp as a scalpel. "You were written out, Emma," she told me over coffee. "They filed an amended version after your father passed, claimed you were unreachable, said you had refused inheritance, that you suffered from instability." Instability? I nearly dropped my cup. She looked away. "They filed a notarized letter, signed in your name, said you declined any share and relinquished rights to the estate." I felt my stomach turn. "I never signed any letter," I whispered. "I know," she said. "I kept a copy." She handed me a yellowed page from her drawer, one she had kept for reasons she couldn't quite explain. I scanned the signature. It looked like mine. Almost. But there was one thing they didn't know. My left wrist, my dominant hand, was fractured in Kandahar in 2016. My signature changed after that, subtly. My loops were tighter, my slant sharper. This signature, it was pre-2016. I had them. But it wasn't enough to have documents. I needed testimony. I needed someone who knew what Caleb had done and was willing to talk. That person came in the form of Jasper, our old neighbor, Vietnam vet, retired notary, and lifelong town gossip. He remembered the day Caleb came to him. Said it was urgent, Jasper told me. Brought a form, claimed it was from you. I asked where you were. He said you were overseas. Couldn't come in person, but you gave permission. I should have known better. I notarized it anyway. Damn fool that I am. Would you say that on record? He hesitated. Jasper, he lied to you. He used your name to take everything from me. After a long silence, he nodded. Yeah, I'll say it. I won't let that boy twist my hand twice. I walked back to my truck and sat in the silence. The pieces were coming together. A forged letter, a forged deed, a manipulated notary, and a family that rewrote history. But what I didn't know yet, what would unravel everything, was what Caleb and Monica were hiding behind that renovation in the basement, because it wasn't just about a house. It never was. There's a kind of silence that doesn't just press against your ears, it presses into your bones. That's what those nights felt like. I was staying in a rundown motel just outside town, room 204, the kind where the wallpaper curls at the corners and the air conditioning hums like it's dying. I'd wake up 3 or 4 times a night, heart pounding, like someone had shouted my name in the dark. But the room was always empty, always silent. Rock bottom doesn't hit you like a crash. It hits like erosion, slow, grinding, a piece of you chipped away every day until you can't remember what hole felt like. I had nowhere to go, no family to turn to. My military benefits covered the basics. But without an address, I couldn't access the full pension. Ironically, the address that should have been mine was the very thing keeping me from moving forward. The final blow came on a Wednesday. I'd gone to the bank to freeze any pending activity on the estate account. The clerk was polite, too polite, and after scanning my ID and pulling up the records, she gave me a practiced smile. "I'm sorry, Ms. Preston, you were removed as a beneficiary last year. This account now lists Mr. Caleb Preston as the sole owner." "That can't be," I said, voice shaking. "I never signed anything. I never authorized—" She cut me off gently. "There's a power of attorney on file. Dated March 8th, 2022. Signed by you." March 8th. I was in Qatar on a cybersecurity task force that entire month. I gripped the edge of the counter so tightly I thought the laminate might crack. "Can I see the form?" She hesitated, then slid the document across. There it was again. My name in ink that didn't belong to me. My signature, but not my hand. I took a photo. I had to ask 3 times before she would confirm the notary's name. A man named Carson White. I remembered him, Caleb's old college buddy. The one who worked at the town registrar for a while before moving into private real estate. It all stank. I walked out of the bank and sat on the curb. People passed by, casting glances at the woman in boots and a faded army jacket, hunched over her knees like she'd been shot. Maybe I had. That night, my truck wouldn't start. Battery dead. I sat there for hours, staring at the motel sign flickering like it was trying to give up too. I didn't cry, but I did call the VA hotline, just to hear a voice. The man on the other end was calm, kind, asked me if I was safe. "Not really," I said, "but I'm alive." "Do you have someone you trust?" I paused. Thought of Ruth. We hadn't spoken in years. She'd been my closest friend in college, a legal savant who went off to Washington while I enlisted. We'd lost touch after my 3rd deployment. She was successful now, partner at some firm in Arlington. But her number was still in my phone, and I dialed it. She picked up on the 2nd ring. "Emma," I didn't know what to say, just sat there breathing. "Emma, where are you?" "Maple Hollow," I managed. She exhaled sharply. "What happened?" "I need help," I whispered. "And I think I'm losing my mind." She didn't ask questions, just told me she was coming. The next morning, Ruth pulled into the motel lot in a silver sedan that looked like it had never seen dirt. She stepped out in heels and a tailored blazer, looking like she belonged in a courtroom. Not beside my rusted-out truck, but she didn't flinch when she saw me. She hugged me. No words. Just arms around shoulders that hadn't been held in years. "I read your texts," she said as we sat in the diner across the street. "I read everything. This is criminal, Emma. This isn't a dispute. It's fraud." "I have no proof. Not really. You have enough to start," she said. "But I need you to be honest with me. How bad are things?" I looked out the window. Thought of my mom's earrings in the drawer. The will, the photos, all gone. I don't have a home. I don't have a name. I'm just surviving. She nodded and I saw it in her eyes. Not pity, not charity, fury. "We'll build a case," she said, Rick Race. From the ground up. You were erased, but I promise you, we're going to make noise." That was the first moment I started to believe again. But the very next day, someone slipped a note under my motel door. It wasn't signed. It wasn't folded. 1 line. "Stop digging or you'll wish you stayed gone." I stared at it for hours, running my thumb over the ink like it might disappear, but it didn't. It stayed, just like I would, because I had nothing left to lose. I've never believed in rebirth. You don't just wake up one day a new person because you shaved your head or started journaling. Real change doesn't come in a single moment, it comes in fragments. One painful, deliberate piece at a time. Ruth didn't waste a second. She pulled strings, made calls, activated every legal tool she had, and made it clear. We weren't fighting for charity, we were fighting for justice and for truth. I became her project, and I let her, because even a broken structure needs scaffolding to rebuild. The first thing we did was get me off the motel floor. A small studio above a closed florist shop became my home base. It smelled like dust and potpourri, but it had a working lock, a desk, and a window that faced the courthouse clock tower. Ruth called it symbolic. I called it temporary. I didn't want comfort. I wanted clarity. Next came the timeline. We laid out every document, every date, every so-called notarized signature. Ruth color-coded everything. Blue for genuine, red for forged. By the time we finished mapping it out, the pattern was undeniable. "This isn't sloppiness," she said, flipping through pages. "This is coordination. Your brother didn't just take what was yours, he built a paper trail designed to bury you." "But why?" I asked. "Why go this far?" "Because once someone decides you don't exist, anything they take becomes theirs." Her words stuck with me. I'd been thinking like a soldier. Straight lines, chain of command, rules of engagement. But this wasn't war. It was family. And families don't fight clean. I started training again. Not physically, not yet. My body still ached from the years, from the stress. But mentally, I was sharper than I had been in months. I pored over tax records, court filings, old email backups. I learned to scan metadata, trace PDF origins, pull IP logs from open documents. It wasn't enough to know they forged my signature. I needed to prove when, how, and with what tool. That's when I reached out to a friend from my DoD days, Isaac. Isaac was a digital forensics specialist, now freelancing for whistleblowers and journalists. He owed me a favor, and I cashed it in with a single encrypted message. He flew in the next week. Isaac looked exactly the same. Baggy hoodie, beanie over too long hair, and a laptop that had more duct tape than stickers. He set up in the back of the florist shop, muttering curses and sipping energy drinks. "You want the receipts?" he said. "I'll get you the receipts. In 3 days." He uncovered enough to choke a courtroom. Login trails from Caleb's network accessing estate documents months before Dad's decline. Edits to power of attorney templates from Monica's laptop. Metadata showing last-minute changes to the notarized letter hours before it was submitted. But the best part? He traced a string of emails between Caleb and someone named C. White, using a dummy domain from a now-defunct property group. Carson White. The notary. "He's the linchpin," Ruth said. "If we can prove collusion between him and Caleb, the whole structure collapses." So we drove out to find him. Carson had moved out of state, lived in a weathered mobile home just past the West Virginia line. He opened the door, half-dressed, cigarette dangling, eyes wary. When he saw me, he paled. "I have nothing to say," he said, starting to shut the door. But Ruth wedged her foot in. "Actually, you do. Because if you don't speak to us, you'll be speaking to a federal investigator instead." He froze. And then he broke. He let us in, sat down with trembling hands, spilled everything. Caleb had paid him $15,000 to forge the notary seal and backdate the power of attorney. Said it was a formality, said his sister wasn't coming back. "But she did," Carson whispered, and I kept waiting for the knock. I knew it would come. I recorded everything. We had enough now. Enough to file. But we weren't just aiming for a property dispute. Ruth wanted something bigger. A full criminal complaint, fraud, perjury, conspiracy to commit real estate title tampering. "I'm not here to take the house back," I told her. "I'm here to make them answer for what they did. All of it." So we filed. The complaint shook things loose faster than I expected. Caleb's attorney reached out. cordial, curious, trying to assess the damage. I said one thing: "We're not settling." The next day, my email was hacked. My medical records, specifically my PTSD diagnosis, were leaked anonymously to a local gossip blog. The article painted me as unstable, erratic, a danger to myself and others. It cited nothing, quoted no one, but it stung. I sat in the dark that night, the article glowing on my screen, and felt the old doubts creeping in. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was too broken to win this. But then Ruth texted me a photo. It was a scan of my grandfather's journal. She'd found it tucked in an old legal box in the town archive, a single line underlined twice. "Emma sees what the rest of us don't. She sees truth before we're brave enough to say it out loud." I read that sentence 100 times. And then I went back to work. Because if truth was my weapon, then it was time to sharpen the blade. The first time I stood across the street from my childhood home again, I didn't recognize it. The porch light had been replaced with a sterile LED glow. The garden was gone. Mom's wild roses replaced with gravel and drought-resistant shrubs. Even the color of the shutters was different. Once faded blue, now a sharp, sterile black. But that wasn't what made it feel foreign. It was the silence. Not the comforting kind, like Sunday mornings with coffee and vinyl records, but the tense kind, the kind that hums like an unspoken threat. Something about the way the curtains never moved, the way the gate lock clicked too quickly, the way lights flicked on at strange hours and never all at once. It was no longer a home. It was a bunker, and it wasn't meant to keep people out. It was meant to hide something inside. I didn't come back in uniform. That part of me was finished. No medals, no rank. Just plain jeans, boots, and a nondescript jacket. I wore a wig, a short dark bob, and a pair of tinted glasses. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want anyone to see me until I was ready to be seen. Ruth set up an official observation order through the court. Nothing intrusive, just the legal groundwork for documenting unusual property activity in a pending investigation. But I didn't wait for court dates. I watched. From the back of a coffee shop across the street. From inside my car parked 3 blocks down. From the alley behind the old tailor shop where I used to buy homecoming dresses. I watched and I took notes. It started small. Late-night deliveries, unmarked trucks pulling into the side gate, boxes going in, nothing coming out. One night, I counted 3 men, all wearing gloves, none speaking a word. Caleb stood with them, arms crossed, directing quietly. They didn't see me. I was good at being invisible. I documented everything, license plates, delivery times, even the power surges from their electrical grid. Isaac tapped into the city's utilities log. There were spikes at odd hours. Something industrial. Something cold. Freezers. I called Ruth. They're storing something. It's not wine or flowers. It's controlled, it's sealed, and it's buried deep. She didn't question it. Then we find out what. That night, I waited until the house went dark. I pulled on gloves, slipped through the gate behind the fence that once held my treehouse. My breath caught when my foot landed on the porch steps. The wood still creaked the same way. The lock on the basement hatch wasn't new, but the keyhole was. They'd installed biometric access. It confirmed what I suspected. They were hiding something valuable, sensitive, even dangerous. I pressed my ear to the metal door. Nothing. I placed a small magnetic recorder on the underside of the step. Motion triggered. Isaac had custom built it. It would capture movement, footsteps, and any voice above a whisper. Then I left. The next day, the neighborhood buzzed with gossip. A break-in had been reported, but nothing was stolen. The police didn't investigate too hard. Caleb still had friends, still had money, but I had ears inside now. That week, I listened. I heard Monica crying, heard Caleb yelling, heard them argue about timelines, exposure. files that needed to be deleted. And then I heard a name, Marchand Logistics. It made my blood go cold. Marchand was a defense contractor I'd investigated years ago. They were flagged for falsified invoices on military gear. We never proved anything. The trail went cold. Now here it was again, leaking out from under my childhood home. Ruth's voice turned steel when I told her, "That's not just theft, that's federal fraud." "Do you think my family's laundering gear? I think your brother's using that house as a drop point. And I think your father knows." It hit me then. Dad wasn't a passive bystander. He was part of this. The man who once told me, "We build legacies, Emma. We don't steal them," had been signing over fake leases and contracts while calling me unstable in legal paperwork. He'd erased me because I saw too much. That weekend, I got my hands on a set of floor plans. The house had changed since I lived there, but the skeleton was the same. The basement now had a separate access door, reinforced, and cameras. I needed someone inside, so I made a call to the one person who still worked housekeeping for the Prestons, Louisa. She used to bring me warm cookies when I had the flu. She called me Mija and brushed my hair when Mom was too tired. She wasn't just an employee. She was family. When she saw me waiting behind the bakery, she wept. "They told me you were dangerous," she said. "They said not to trust you. Do you believe them?" She grabbed my hand. "No." Louisa agreed to wear a wire. It wasn't legal yet, but it was necessary. I needed to know what they were hiding. Everything changed after that. We filed an emergency motion to halt all property transfers and freeze family trust accounts. We submitted the new evidence, the procurement links, the fraud timelines. We added a personal affidavit from Annabelle and a separate one from Jasper, the notary, who had confessed to falsifying documents under Caleb's direction. Then we filed a formal federal complaint, military contract fraud, wire fraud, and identity falsification under Title 18. That same afternoon, we received a notification. Caleb Preston, William Preston, and Monica Preston were officially under federal investigation. And that night, a car followed me for 6 miles. It didn't flash its lights, didn't pass me. Just trailed, silent and patient. I parked at a gas station and waited. The car didn't move. I approached. The windows were tinted. I knocked once. It drove away. Fast. I didn't report it, didn't flinch, because the truth was already moving faster than fear could catch up. The next morning, I received another message, this one from a restricted address. "The judge has seen the video, testimony has been reopened, they're going to court. You have 6 days." And with that, the real battle began. I never expected silence to be so loud. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse parking lot overflowed, not with media, not yet, but with townspeople, neighbors, veterans, former clients of my father's business. I recognized some, others I didn't. They weren't here to cheer. They were here to listen. Inside, the air was heavy, every bench filled, every aisle flanked with people shifting uncomfortably in stiff suits or faded flannel. Some clutched notepads, others their own secrets. I stood with Ruth in the hallway just outside courtroom 4B. She adjusted the cuffs of her blazer. "They're going to deny everything or blame each other," I nodded. "Let them." We entered together. Caleb was already seated. His lawyer whispered something into his ear. But he didn't acknowledge me. Monica sat beside him, head lowered, cheeks hollow. Her wedding ring was gone, and at the far end, my father. He looked smaller than I remembered, suit too big, eyes rimmed with the kind of gray that no amount of sleep could erase. He didn't look at me, not once. When the judge entered, the room shifted, shoulders squared, throats cleared. The trial began. Ruth laid the foundation like a master architect. Documents, timelines, chain of custody. Her voice didn't waver. Not once. Then came the first bombshell, the original will, with matching metadata, notarization timestamps, and video evidence of my grandfather's intent. Then the recordings. One by one, we played them. Caleb orchestrating false transfers. My father suggesting a severance if I came too close. Monica crying, "I thought she'd never come back." Each played like a dagger twisting deeper. But it was the footage from the hospital that shattered the mask. Mom's voice. Her dying request. Her whispered hope that they'd honor what was right, and his silence. A collective breath swept through the courtroom. Even the stenographer's hands paused for a beat. Caleb's attorney stood and objected, claiming manipulation, emotional coercion, privacy violations. The judge waved it off. "You submitted her medical records as evidence of your claim. This is admissible." Next came Annabelle's testimony. She took the stand, voice shaking, eyes darting, but she didn't falter. They used the house as a logistics waypoint. Contracts were backdated, payment cycles were laundered, they falsified security clearances tied to Emma's military ID. I was told to shred files. I didn't. Caleb's team pushed hard, called her disgruntled, claimed blackmail. But she held steady. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand spine straight, wore no uniform, no ribbon, just the truth. "I didn't come here to win back a house," I began. "I came here to reclaim my name." I told them everything, from the forged signatures to the sealed documents to the attempt to paint me mentally unstable, all of it. I ended with the letter I'd found tucked behind the old photo frame in my grandfather's office. His last letter to me, never mailed. Ruth had uncovered it days before in a sealed archive box. "Emma, if this reaches you, it means they've tried to push you out. But you were always the one with fire, with honor. You were. The house was never the point. You were. Love, Grandpa." I read it aloud. Caleb scoffed, but Monica broke. She stood suddenly, knocking over her chair. "I told you this would happen," she cried, voice cracking. "She wasn't supposed to find the footage. I told you." The courtroom exploded in murmurs. The judge banged his gavel. Monica covered her face and whispered, "I didn't want to do it. He said we'd lose everything." "Who said?" the judge asked sharply. She looked at Caleb, then my father. Both of them. Gasps. The defense panicked, papers shuffled, whispers flew like daggers. The judge ordered a recess. 10 minutes. Outside the room, my legs buckled. I sat on the bench. Ruth handed me a water bottle. "They're unraveling," she said. "I know. You still want to go through with it?" I didn't answer. I just stood and walked to the window overlooking the street. Below, more people had gathered. A group of vets held signs. "We believe Emma. Honor can't be erased. Truth over blood." The courtroom reconvened. The judge addressed the room. "Given the compelling evidence submitted, documentary, testimonial, and digital, the court will allow federal prosecutors to proceed with criminal fraud and conspiracy charges." He turned to the defendants. "Caleb Preston, you are hereby remanded pending formal indictment." A marshal approached. Caleb didn't move. His jaw clenched. His eyes locked on me. No apology, no plea, just fury. Then my father, the judge, hesitated. "William Preston, for your participation in the concealment and fraud, you are also to be remanded into federal custody." He stood slowly. For the first time, he looked at me, and then he said it. I was wrong. 3 words, soft, hoarse. I didn't respond, because regret spoken too late is just another kind of weapon. As the gavel fell, Ruth placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did it," she said. "No," I whispered. "We did." The day after the hearing, the sky broke open. It didn't rain. It poured. Sheets of water washed over Maple Hollow like the town itself was trying to rinse off the years of lies that had settled in its bones. I watched from the second-floor window of Ruth's office. sipping tea with hands that finally stopped trembling. It was over. Not entirely, not legally. There'd be arraignments, investigations, depositions. Caleb and my father were facing felony charges: wire fraud, forgery, conspiracy, identity theft. Monica was cooperating, her statement likely reducing her sentence. The house, the trust, the assets, they were all frozen pending division and restitution. But the real verdict had already been passed. They lost something more valuable than property. They lost their story. And I got mine back. The morning headlines were brutal. Preston Dynasty exposed in inheritance and defense contract scandal. Local news stations ran segments showing old family photos next to court sketches. My face, once scrubbed from memory, was now everywhere, but I wasn't hiding anymore. That afternoon, I visited the Veterans Memorial Library, the same place that used to display a photo of my father accepting a community leadership award. It had been taken down. In its place was a rotating digital frame. I stood in front of it, heart pounding, as the images shifted. Community volunteers, first responders, and then my name. Emma Louise Preston, Army Cyber Defense, 2003-2023. Honored for integrity, service, and civil accountability. It wasn't a monument, not a bronze statue, but it was real. That night, I got a phone call from a number I hadn't seen in years. Emma, my mother's sister, Aunt Jean, she'd moved to Oregon when I was 15. We hadn't spoken since before my third deployment. I've been following everything, she said. I wanted to tell you. I believe you. I always did. My throat tightened. Thank you. I'm proud of you. I didn't know how much I needed those words until I heard them. The next morning, I returned to 118 Clover Hill Lane. The gates were open now, no patrol lights, no black sedans, just the creak of the wind chimes Mom had hung from the porch eaves decades ago. The locks had been changed by court order. Ruth had the keys. She handed them to me quietly, but I hesitated at the threshold. I wasn't sure I wanted it anymore. Not the house, not the ghosts. But I stepped inside anyway. Every room was stripped, furniture gone, walls bare, but the bones remained. The scar on the staircase where I fell at 7, the pencil marks on the pantry door where Mom tracked our growth, the floorboard that still creaked when you stepped near the back window, and in the attic, a box, labeled Emma. Inside, a copy of my first college application, a faded drawing I made at age 8, and a birthday card from my mother I had never received. It read, "I know you're far away, but I never stop thinking of you. You are loved, Emma, even when they won't say it." You are loved. I sat in the dust and cried for the first time in months, not because I was broken, but because I was whole. Later that week, Ruth hosted a small gathering at her office, a celebration, she called it. Isaac brought a thumb drive with a compiled report of everything we'd uncovered. He handed it to me. "This is yours," he said. "The full story." I held it like it weighed 100 pounds, and then I asked, what if I told it? Publicly? Ruth smiled. You think people are ready to hear it? I don't care if they're ready. It's not about them. It was about everyone who'd been erased, everyone who'd been told they were unstable, dramatic, bitter, ungrateful. Everyone who'd been locked out of their own lives by people who smiled while stealing. It was about daughters, it was about soldiers, it was about survivors, and it was about me. A week later, I stood behind a podium at the Maple Hollow Civic Hall, reading my story aloud at a town veterans forum. People cried, others stood. A young woman approached me afterward, shaking. "They took my inheritance too," she whispered. I didn't fight back, but now I think I can. I hugged her. You already started. As I left the hall, I passed the judge who had overseen my case. He nodded once. You reminded us what justice looks like, he said. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was clean, crisp. I walked to my car alone, but I didn't feel alone. Because I had my name, my truth, and my story. No one could erase that ever again.